She's so pretty.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Did you hear us say she's so pretty? That's what we were saying as you came on.
Thanks. Hi. Well, thanks for inviting me to chat.
Thanks for being here on a Sunday.
Yeah, no problem. I hope you don't mind my baby is probably going to join after a little bit. She's quite interested about what might be going on the computer. So
No worries at all. All right, so we're going to take a picture really fast and then we can start if anybody has questions. All right, are you guys ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Perfect. All right, to start. Thanks for being here today. Happy Sunday.
yeah, thanks. You too.
Where are you, Kathleen?
I live in Washington, D.C. And you guys are in Georgia, is that right?
We're all over the place.
Oh, okay.
All over.
I'm in Virginia. I'm about 3 hours south of DC.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
In the Shenandoah Valley.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's very lovely.
Mhm.
I'm in Michigan.
Okay.
Yeah, me too, Michigan.
Michiganders.
Yeah. I'm from Illinois originally, so I love the
Oh, okay.
I'm from Illinois originally.
Yeah.
Or Phyllis and I.
Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where is from Illinois? Chicago?
Becky and I are from a little town called Watseka, which is central Illinois, farm country.
Okay. Well, I'm from Galesburg. So I'm like near Peoria.
Yeah.
We're south of Chicago, south of Kankakee.
Oh, okay, sure. Nice.
And then Meryl and I actually share a wall. We have townhomes, and so she's on the back side of that wall, which is fun. So
Nice.
we are close, and we're in Woodstock.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Well, hopefully
Okay,
everybody has as
so-
nice weather as we do.
What's your weather like there?
Oh, it's
It's a
beautiful.
little chilly
today.
here.
It had been rainy all week, and now we've got nice
Yeah.
sun. So it's,
Now it's gorgeous.
yeah.
Nice. Okay, so I have a question for you.
Mhm.
Are you working on anything currently that we can read coming up?
So I am working on something. It is not sold, so I don't really have any details to release. But I did send a full draft to my agent just the other day, so I feel really good about it and I'm excited. But even if she likes it, it wouldn't be out until 2022 or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, not anything right away. But
Okay, well, congratulations on having a full draft, though. That's got to be
thanks.
exciting.
It felt really good. The pandemic was not really great for my writing. So,
How old is your baby?
she's 7 months.
Oh,
so she was born in
wow.
August. She also was not great for my writing.
That's quite an
Yes.
experience having a child during this time.
It's been strange. Honestly, so I also have a 2.5-year-old. And so last March when everything started, he was 1, not quite 2. And he had been with a nanny, but then all of a sudden he was home all the time with me. And that was honestly the hardest part, because I was trying to write. My husband was trying to work out of our home. And then we had this very active 1.5-year-old just bouncing all around. So that actually was probably worse than having the baby, because with the baby, it's not like I'm taking her a lot of places anyway. I mean, if it wasn't pandemic times, I'd be taking her to, baby yoga and little baby music classes. As it is, she just hangs out and we go to the park. But so it's been okay. But I always joke that she thought I had a half polka dot face for the beginning of her life, because I gave her a gray mask and I was wearing a mask in the hospital. So
Aw.
she looked a bit surprised when she saw my face for the first time.
Oh, I didn't think about like little babies.
So I don't think she'll remember probably.
Yeah. But babies really learn by like seeing people's facial expressions and such. And I didn't think about that. Now
Yeah,
when they're out and about with their parents and everyone has a mask on and
yeah.
they have to interpret eyes a lot more than most people.
Yeah. We were at the park yesterday and another kid was being really rambunctious and she was kind of like looking like, should I be afraid of this kid or not? So I kind of like peeled my mask back and smiled at her. So everybody was playing, we're having fun.
So one thing that was interesting getting to the book a little bit, when Brittany first put the list out, I think it was, Are you sleeping? And I couldn't find it anywhere. And I'm looking up Kathleen Barber. And so I texted Brittany, I said, this book has the same cover, but a different title. And then led to us realizing it was like, they're making a TV show out of the book.
Yeah. So that was one of the strangest things. I actually pulled the book off my shelf this morning and I realized I pulled off the Are You Sleeping copy. So they made a television show and they decided to change the title, which is so if anybody has seen the TV show or knows anything about it, they use my book as source material, but they it doesn't follow my story.
Really?
Yeah. So in the book, the protagonist is Josie, and you experience all of the events through Josie's point of view. In the television show, the protagonist is Poppy. So you get much more of her story, and you get a lot more of her backstory.
That's odd.
Yeah, interestingly, when I was talking to different producers about who wanted to option the book, most of them wanted to focus on Poppy. And I think a lot of the reason was because they wanted to turn it into a television series. And so by following Poppy's character, they were then able to, so like next season, she can do something different.
Jump to another story.
Yeah, she can have like another case.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So it was strange, but it's also really neat to see them taking something that I had created and then building something new out of it. So in the television show, also they cast Octavia Spencer as Poppy Parnell, which is amazing, but it's just not really how I wrote Poppy. So so she necessarily has a different backstory and kind of like different different motivations for what she's doing. So that makes the TV show really cool, but it's also different. But so because they changed so much, they wanted a different title, and they chose Truth Be Told, which as soon as my agent and I actually heard it, we're like, oh, that was a really good title. Why didn't we get that? So we went back and forth a lot about like, well, should we change the title of the book? Are people going to not realize it's the same book? And we finally just changed the title, and it's a little confusing, but I really like the title Truth Be Told. So I think it helped that they have the same cover, which I think probably helps.
Yeah.
If you get it on the ebook, you get it with the TV tie-in cover, which is different, right?
So it was interesting. I log all my books that I read on Goodreads, and I can go search Truth Be Told, and I click it and I say currently reading. It switches it to Are You Sleeping with like a yellow and gray cover. I don't know if you know that.
Really?
This one.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that one.
Really? That's kind of interesting, really, the way this has worked.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I mean, even though they kind of diverted, which I guess the way Hollywood is going to do, wasn't it exciting to get it optioned for television? I mean, really.
It was very exciting. And the entire way I was kind of taking it with a hefty degree of salt, because so many books get optioned and then they don't actually get made into anything. So every time there was a little bit of movement, like, oh, like agents are interested, oh, like some producers are interested, I was trying not to get too excited. But then it just got progressively more exciting. They were like, oh yeah, these exciting producers are interested. Reese Witherspoon is interested. Then like Octavia Spencer is signed on.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was very, very exciting.
Yeah. What network is it on? Is it on Apple TV or?
It is, yeah, it's on Apple. Yeah. So I did not participate in the actual adaptation or anything. You know, I live out here in DC, and they were doing the show out in California, and I kind of figured that the professionals should be handling all of those things. But they did let me come out to the set, and so I gotta see how it was made for a while. Yeah, it was really pretty cool. I'd never really seen anything about how television was made, so to see them working on like my own show was really cool. And I got to go to the premiere, which is very exciting. There was a red carpet and everything.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the show. Were you happy with it?
I was. It's different. And there were a couple of times where I was like, because you know, these are my characters, and I've lived with them for so long. And then to see some of the differences that some of the things that they changed was a little hard. You know, I knew that Poppy was going to be different. That was fine, and that was great. Poppy in my book was not a very developed character. When they made some changes to Josie and Lainey, that was when I was kind of just like, but you know, I kind of reminded myself that like that was what I'd signed on for, and you know, it was interesting to see how other people interpreted my characters.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of how it is every time you like publish a book. You know, you send it out there, and readers interpret them in their own head also. So I was just kind of.
So when it's optioned and some company goes with it, runs with it, gets to the point of making adaptations and changing it, I mean, is it just like, do they have free reign to change and adapt and change characters and change the story? I mean, does it ever get to a point where you're like, this is not even the book I wrote, and why is it so?
You know, so I'm not entirely certain how everybody's contracts are. In my contract, I was signing away those rights. I was kind of like handing over complete creative reign to the producers. I know other authors who have had similar contracts, so I think it's fairly standard that unless you are somebody who's a big name, like I don't know, well, I was gonna say maybe like Stephen King or somebody has more control, but I kind of remember hearing that like he hated the adaptation of The Shining. So you know, so I'm not entirely sure, but yeah. Also, I definitely remember somebody told me around that time, the guy who wrote Thank You for Smoking, I think it is, when they got a screenwriter signed on to adapt his book, the screenwriter called him and was like, "Hi, just want to introduce myself. I'm the guy that's going to F up your book." And yeah. The first time, so they did not send the scripts to me as things went along, but they did send me the pilot just out of courtesy. And I read the pilot, and I was like, oh my God. Things are very different. In the pilot, they killed off one of my main characters, and I was like,
oh wow.
And yeah, they well, if you see it, it'll happen fast. They kill off Aunt A pretty quickly.
Oh wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
Goodness, no, not Aunt A.
I know. That was how I felt. I was like, oh. And that was my first reaction. And my second reaction was like, oh my God, this is really, really good. People are going to watch the show, and they're going to read the book. And then I'm going to get all these Goodreads reviews that are going to be like, the book is trash, watch the show.
Oh.
Like, called my agent. I was like, we have made a huge mistake. We need to like stop this. And she talked me down and told me nobody ever goes on Goodreads and says the book is trash, watch the show. So
The time it's the other way around. People are like, the book is better than the movie. The book's better than the television production, because books are usually, you know, they develop more. There's more time.
yeah.
I just think that there's such different media that I don't have a problem with people who read a book, maybe like Pat Conroy's The Great Santini, and then the movie's made, and the movie's different than the book. They're both good. You know, you can enjoy them on their own level and realize that when screenwriters go to adapt a book, they're doing something very different. That what they're appealing to is different than when you're reading. So as long as you can accept that, but you know, you get people who are fanatical about a book and they want it to appear on screen the way they visualized it. And that can be very difficult. But I think a lot of times you can have a really good book and a really good movie, and they don't really match that well. As long as they get maybe the intent of the author, the message, that would be good. So they don't totally change the whole philosophy of it.
The reality is that we all have a different vision in our head. You know, each of us, as we read the book, you know, if we had taken all our different visuals, it would have matched. You know, it was, we all have our own movie anyway of what we're reading.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Natalie, you were going to say something.
Oh, that's okay. So Kathleen, that makes a really good point. Like, did it change the message that you were trying to send in this book, what they did with this series?
No, I don't think that it changed the message that I was trying to say. They definitely added additional layers to it. But the core message that I was trying to get through, I think, came through. And I will say though, that was one of the things that I was slightly worried about when you turn Poppy into the protagonist, right? Because if you're making her a protagonist that people are going to want to stay with, not just through like one season, but through multiple seasons of a series. You know, in the book, she's the antagonist. But I think they did a really good job of making her a very like complex, layered character that you root for, but at the same time, you're like,
she's a little aggressive.
maybe you should have done that.
So
Kathleen, since you were or somebody asked, like, what's the core message? What's one of the core messages of the book that you were? I'm interested to hear what.
Well, what I was really hoping to get across was, I really wanted people to kind of challenge the way that they think about how they consume media that's based on real people. So the way that the book came about was I had been listening to Serial, the first season of the Serial podcast with when Sarah Koenig was kind of like digging into Adnan Syed's claims of innocence. And I got really, really into it. Like, Serial was the first podcast I had ever listened to, and I just like fell head over heels in it. I listened to like all of the episodes. I came to it late, so I was able to listen to like all the episodes like in a row. And I was online searching things. My brother had like introduced me to the podcast, so I was just like constantly like texting him. I was like, David, but like, did you think about this? And I realized at one point that I caught myself like doing a Google image search to see what some of like the more like minor characters in this case looked like. And that was kind of when I was like, you know, I'm kind of crossing a line here. These are real people, not just characters in a story. And that was kind of then when I sat back and was like, oh, like, I wonder how the popularity of this show and the way that people like me are getting like swept up in the excitement of it, how that is impacting Hae Min Lee's family, not even just her family, but all the other people that knew them and knew them to be real people. And so that was when I kind of like wrote the book. And so the book is kind of just like me like working out those feelings and that concern. So then one of the reasons that I have in the book all the like the podcast transcripts and like the Twitter bits was because that was kind of how I experienced Serial, and I kind of wanted people to be able to experience the podcast and the book Reconsidered the same way.
So were you a writer or an aspiring writer before this, or did that really stimulate your thoughts and putting it on paper?
I have been writing my whole life. I have actually been writing stories about Josie and Lainey since I was in high school. So I'd never really, I had like one finished draft for them, but it was like not very good. But I'd always wanted to write about those characters. I felt really strongly about them, but I never quite found their story. And so when I listened to Serial, and I knew that I wanted to kind of explore what it'd be like for the victim's family in a series like that. I was like, oh wait, I have the perfect cast already. So I put them together.
I like the online comments, you know, that people, the amateur detectives at home are just sitting there figuring out what they think has happened. You know, that was I thought interesting.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. Again, it was, I spent so much time on like the Serial hashtag on Twitter and the dedicated subreddit that to me, those kind of things were really integral to the story.
I liked that a lot. I also really appreciated the tie-in with the cold case websites and what have you. Our group had just read, okay, what's the name of the book that we read? McNamara's book.
I'll Be Gone in the Dark.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We had read that.
We read that in January.
Right. And so that was the first time I'd heard about those websites out there. And then to see it kind of play out in a different sort of way, in a fictional way, was very fun. I liked that whole tie-in. I enjoyed your use of contemporary media components. I read a lot of history, so it was really nice to see that happening now. I liked it. It was good style.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really want to read I'll Be Gone in the Dark. It's been on my list for a while. I have not quite gone.
Good. I think you like it. Another Illinois girl.
Yeah, that's right.
Originally, yeah.
Yeah.
Ended up in California, but
I started with the HBO series, and that's why we read it, because I fell in love with it. And I'm like, I needed more. I wanted to see where the book took it, you know, if it took it in a different direction or kind of expanded on any of the things that were covered in the show. And so that was what was inspirational to me. And that's why I picked it for our club.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either.
I like that you included a cult, because I always like reading about cults. And I was driving and listening to My Favorite Murder, and they were talking, of course, about a murder that had occurred at a cult in California. And I didn't catch the name because, you know, I'm driving in Atlanta traffic. So later I thought, I'm going to look that up. And so I Googled like murder at California cult. Guess what? There's a lot. First off, there are a whole bunch of cults in California. I mean, unbelievable. And then not just one murder. So I had a little trouble. I had to go back to the podcast to find out which cult specifically they were referring to.
Well, Natalie, you used to live in California. Any cults?
Not in San Diego that I knew of.
Kathleen, did you do any research on cults? Like, what was the reasoning for incorporating one? I did love that aspect. But...
Oh, thanks. I did not do any specific research when I was writing the book. It had been one of the aspects that had kind of been part of these characters' backstory for a long time, because I had gotten really interested in cults for a while in college maybe, and had read a bunch of it about them at that time. And so it kind of built it into the fabric. And I did not go back and do very much research. I did a little bit, but I probably could have done more. But when I was writing it, I was kind of more on the podcast research.
Yeah, I wouldn't have wanted much more about the cult. I think it would have diffused it, what was going on with the podcast. I mean, yeah, that was certainly an element, but that wasn't what shaped Aaron and the events.
So Kathleen, you mentioned, Goodreads reviews. So I actually never left a review. I just do ratings. But talking to an author, like I always am torn on a rating because I think different people in their mind have a different meaning what a 3-star versus a 4-star versus 5-star means. To some people, a 3-star is bad, but to me, a 3-star is good. Like if I like a book and I enjoyed it, I'm generally like 3 stars. And if I really liked it, 4. And then if I can't stop thinking about it forever, it's 5. But I still think books that I really enjoy, that I really like and would recommend to people, I give 3. Now, how does that feel like on the author side, like to receive
Yeah.
a
That's something that a lot of the author communities that I'm in talk about quite a bit. And there's this disconnect because a lot of people, most readers, I would say most readers are like you, and that they consider like 3 stars would be like, this is a book that I liked.
Yeah.
I'm pretty certain that in like the Goodreads stars, it actually says 3 stars, liked it. I know before I was a published author, I definitely considered 3 stars to be a good review. I've seen some other authors get really heated that, oh no, if you can't give a book like 5 stars, don't rate it at all.
Really?
Yeah. To be fair, that's generally when they're generally talking about other authors. And so I don't rate other authors, particularly other authors that I know, less than 4 stars. That's just because I know that a bunch of us have kind of like fragile egos. But the way that you are using Goodreads is totally legitimate, and definitely the way that that I think it's intended. Because you can't really have star inflation if everybody only gets 4 or 5 stars, then then everybody would only have 4 or 5 stars.
yeah, you need that differentiation. Like you can't just give them all the best.
Yeah. I do not actually go to Goodreads and read my reviews. I do not have a thick enough skin to do that. I started doing it when Are You Sleeping first, so before it was published and there were like review copies out there and the first one started coming in, I was like, this is very exciting, I will read these. No, I quickly learned that like even the good ones, I was just like, oh, well, maybe I should have changed that,
Oh, gosh.
and so at the time, my husband would read them and he would read me like the really good ones or like the ones that were so bad that they were funny. There's this one guy that he hated my book because he hates books about podcasts and he hates books about twins. And I was like, man, both of those things are like on the front cover.
Why did you read this book?
Like, I would pick up a book about NASCAR. Why would I do that?
Exactly. Yeah. But that was actually a really good reminder for me that reviews are for other readers and really reflect the reader's experience, rather than necessarily, some sort of like end all be all judgment on my work.
Yeah. And I think there is, unfortunately, a percentage of us out there who go to the internet to do any kind of review or anything or whatever social media just to kind of get their rage on. It doesn't matter. I have one of these, influencers that I routinely go to, and it's all about, basic household stuff, what you should buy when she's charming. Actually, she's from Southern Illinois, another Illinois girl. And that's all she does. And she's like the girl next door. She's perfectly harmless. She's got like 3 kids. And it's just like, I'll check with her about, something that I'm thinking about buying just to get her review. And she usually never says anything about any kind of reviews. And one day she said she got up in the middle of the night with her new baby and she read this review about her and it was absolutely devastating. And she started crying and she never had that reaction, and her husband was so upset for her. And then she was like, you just need to accept. And here, why somebody would attack this person is like attacking a puppy. I mean, it made no sense whatsoever. It didn't have anything to do with the review she'd given. It was just personal. And so you just have to accept there are people that's what they do at 3 a.m.
Yeah, I got one that was, I've never gotten anything quite that bad, but I did get one person that they went back to like an Instagram post of mine from like a couple months back. So they took some effort to go through my Instagram feed and then left this comment that was just like, I hate to be negative, but your book just isn't very good. Thanks.
Well, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Did you say to them, you know what? How is your book? How's your book coming along?
I wonder when they would like to be negative, what they would say.
I know. I had all these things that I wanted to respond, and I just deleted their comment.
Yep.
Had you already optioned your book at that time, you could have been like, don't worry.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure the TV series was already out, and I was just like,
you're like, well,
whatever.
yeah. Yeah, I don't understand the need to put that negative energy out there too. It's like, usually if I don't like something, I don't finish it, and I'm not going to bother to go review it.
Yeah.
But,
But I think that's what
like
made the
people-
book so real. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Natalie.
I was just gonna say, I think that's what made the book so real for me, because when the characters, especially Josie, was reading all of those negative comments, she took it so personally. And I think it would be hard not to, especially if you're not a public figure and you, like you said, you're used to it, so you don't look at it anymore. But if you're not used to it and all these people are coming at you with all of these really negative comments, then, you know, she took them to heart. And I think that really was her perspective in doing some of the things that she did and making the choices that she did. And especially not like saying the things that she should have been honest about with Lainey. Like, there are a lot of moments in this book where I'm just cringing because she's saying things out of like her history with her sister versus what she truly wants to say, which is, I love you. Why aren't you like acting normal, you know? So it was real to me. Like, the characters were well written, and I think it was justified, a lot of the things that they were doing, even though they were kind of crazy. Like, it wouldn't happen in my life, but I get why it happened in theirs.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. That's always the thing I think that's hardest for an author, is wanting to, because the characters are so alive in our heads, you know, and wanting the struggle to then get them onto paper so that they come alive for other people. I think is probably one of the hardest things. So I'm really glad to hear that. Thank you.
yeah. I felt the same way when she's lying to Caleb. I'm like, just tell him. You're
Yes.
making it worse. Like,
I know.
Well, literally, yeah. When she's like sitting on the bed to go and she doesn't say anything, I'm like, this is gonna bite you. I'm like, I don't know how, but I'm like, this doesn't end up well for you. I'm like, this is your time. Like, just say your piece and then leave, and like let the chips fall where they may. But then she just leaves, and then he shows up, and like literally, when I'm reading it and he shows up, I'm like, oh no, oh no, oh no. I'm like, I knew this wasn't gonna be good. And then, you know, like Aunt A is there, and he's like, I thought she was dead, and I'm like, well, she's not dead. She's still not dead. I'm like, and if you knew everything, like, I was literally sitting there and just like panicked for her, because I'm like, now what do you do? I'm like, now you are caught like everywhere.
Yeah.
And then he ended up being, yes, I'm like, everything's there. And A's not, you know, dead. She's very like present and real and alive. Your mother's gone. You have a lot of explaining to do. And I'm like, I don't know that I could have taken it so well. You know, like being Caleb, I think I really loved his character because he did take it better than I think I would have taken it. And I'm like, oh, that's mature. I'm like, I would have probably been like, if you're lying about this, like, you haven't been honest about anything.
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I had that
appreciated-
panic moment.
Yeah. I appreciated Caleb's response, because nothing drives me more crazy in a book when there's always this falling out, and a lot of times it's based on a misunderstanding, which just clearly wasn't a misunderstanding. This was lying, but a lot of times and the characters just act so like self-absorbed and like think they know what the other person's thinking, and they don't. And then, oh, now 3/4 of the way through the book, they found their way back. I like that he just stood by her. Like, he had his shock, he had his moments, but I mean, he was real, and you know, everyone reacts differently, and it was nice to see him have that solid reaction, and not always like you see in a book where it's this, you lied to me, I can't trust you, I don't know you. I mean, it was kind of refreshing to see that different side that doesn't happen a lot in fiction.
Thanks.
Well, Gretchen, you just totally destroyed the plot of every Hallmark movie.
I know.
You have to have the misunderstanding that normal people would just go to that person and say, So is that your girlfriend or all the normal things that you would do, they never do in the Hallmark movie until the very end.
No,
So yes, I've seen the Hallmark movies.
Yeah.
I have
And it was-
two. I usually binge watch them on Sundays.
Along with your horror movies at night.
I
sounds like a
like
nice,
balance, y'all.
I do Hallmark movies and true crime. So
that balances everything
right.
out.
It does. I think that's what I enjoyed about this book. I had a little bit of everything in it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, the funny thing about my book is that I had never thought it was suspense until I actually sold it. I had been like pitching it to agents as women's fiction. I was like, this is my women's fiction book. And it wasn't until I sold it that my editor was like, no, what you've written here is a suspense novel. I was like, oh.
or they put it in the bookstore, because sometimes that can be very confusing.
Hey, you're okay. You're okay. You just can't have that. No, you can't have that. There we go. Sorry, she she grabbed a truck that she's not supposed to have. Yeah, I do think so. One of the things that's weird for it is that it often does get shelved with thrillers, which is definitely not a thriller. And so then I do get people who are like, this book was marketed as a thriller and there's nothing thrilling about it. Yeah, it's kind of this weird blend between women's fiction and suspense, I think.
Yeah.
They actually, when they were getting the paperback cover ready to go, probably nobody ever notices, but it says a novel right here. The original draft said a thriller, and I was like, oh no, please don't call it a thriller. That will just inflame people who.
Maybe you have like a new genre called like true crime fiction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why would it not be a thriller?
So it's there's not really a lot of agreement on the lines between like thriller and suspense, but in general, a thriller has somebody whose life is in danger. And although like I would argue that Lainey's life is in danger here in this book, it's generally more of a like someone is coming to get you, life in danger sort of thing. So I mean all the genres are very like fuzzy and fluid, but generally like people who are looking for a book marketed as a thriller kind of expect that bad guy coming to get you.
That's kind of an old-fashioned notion of a thriller being like Tom Clancy type stuff. It's got to have espionage or whatever. But I think that's kind of
That's spy novels. Those are different. That's a different genre.
Yeah.
Spy novels. There's so many that when you start breaking them down, or if you want to really fine tune, the genre, it's hard because they're different. They're completely different storylines. True crime is different than a fictional, a fiction about a crime. So
yeah.
Yeah, it's always kind of interesting to try and find these different genre things.
Your baby is
the
so
most
good. She's
challenging?
just sitting there.
She really is. She's beautiful.
hello.
Yeah, well, she's pretty excited because her brother is not here, but all of her brother's toys are, and she's just not gonna have them.
Yeah.
So she is
That's a fun day.
very excited.
Mhm.
What was the most challenging part about writing this book for you?
The middle is always the most challenging. But in this book specifically, it was that I had started with these characters and that I'd written all these stories about. And so I had sections of the book that were extremely well developed because I had been working on them for a very long time. And so then to kind of weave them together with this new story, it was a little difficult. And then also I had to cut certain things. So there were parts of the story that I had worked on for years that I really liked that didn't actually move the story forward once I had the plot. And there were parts that just had to go. There was for a long time, the book, when I'd been writing it, had opened, excuse me, with this dream sequence. And my agent was like, "You never open a book with a dream sequence." She's like, "I'm sorry, that has to go."
Really?
Yeah. And so that had to go, but I'd been working on it for so long, and I was like, "Oh, but the words are so perfect." Yeah, no, so it lives in a drawer now, but
I wonder if you could take those words or the sequence, like whatever, the dream sequence, because you've spent so much time on it, and incorporate it somehow into the next book or another project or a new novel.
yeah, I never delete anything. I always only just like move things to another Word document that is like lost pieces. So then I can go back and try and like poach things for different pieces. Definitely.
Would you write about Lainey and Josie again in their future, either a prequel or a future relationship?
I haven't. And I think one of the reasons is because I'd spent so long working on them and thinking about them that once I finally like had their thing down, I kind of wanted it to stay intact. And for them to like have any story going forward, there would necessarily have to be conflict. And I just don't know that I want to do that to them, at least right now.
Yeah.
What happened in that dream sequence that got deleted, out of curiosity?
Oh, well, she was, and it happened in many different locations. I had it like originally set in New Zealand, and then it was set in New York, but Josie is going over a bridge, and Lainey is like crawling up from underneath the bridge in a very like sort of like zombie style. It was vivid and I loved it, and nope, it's gone. So my agent was right. She's right about many things usually. So
Oh,
she's, like I said, she's reading some of my work right now, and I hope she's not slashing it apart, being like, "No, this has to go." You know, I suspect she is.
that's what's interesting about I have some friends who've self-published and they're very hard to read, and I'm like, you could just really use an editor. And I'm sure as a writer it's hard to have someone just slash and they almost become, it sounds like, part of co-author, and a lot of times suggesting things and slashing things, and they don't always get the credit, but I definitely can see where they come in handy.
Yeah. It is very difficult to edit your own work. At least in my experience, I find it very difficult to edit my own work, because when I read it, I read what I intended for it to say, not necessarily what it does say. And so I am very lucky that I have a very hands-on agent. She's very editorial in that she reads my work and has a lot of really great suggestions. And one of the things that I appreciate about her is that when I say she's editorial, she's not like in there like making like line edits, but she'll be like, "So this part didn't exactly work for me," and will kind of like talk to me about why, and then that helps me figure out where it should go. I also had a really good working relationship with the editor that I worked with on this book. I thought she really got the story, which was nice. So she like really totally understood my characters and was able to help me kind of like push things a little bit further than I might not have.
I had a professor years ago, and in retrospect, it was kind of a sexist statement, and he said that, the writers in his class were the women. Their problem they had was they're such good housekeepers, because it's kind of how some of us were raised to be good housekeepers. They don't want to throw anything out. They find something so interesting and it doesn't pertain at all to their thesis, but they're going to put it in there because they can't stand to leave it out. And he said, that's the problem. You can't put everything in. You can't put it all in there. You've got to decide what to include and what not to include. But I'm sure it's the same for the men too.
Yeah,
I might not be as good at housekeepers.
Yeah. But that was a problem I had with my second book. I had written in the beginning this like what I thought was like very intriguing, very interesting backstory about the main character and her roommate that I thought was like, well, this like lays the foundation for everything. And my editor was like, we need about a paragraph of this. It's like 10 pages. We take about a paragraph.
Aw.
We read that one last year.
Oh, okay.
We read Follow Me.
Okay.
That's where we started, and I loved it so much we went backwards.
Oh,
and I
thank
picked
you.
another one of your books for this year because I love
thanks.
Follow
Well,
Me so
so
much.
it originally started with like a much deeper dive into Audrey and Izzy's relationship, and Izzy originally had a much larger role in the book, and my editor was like, nobody cares about Izzy, like so she got picked out and thrown away.
It's funny.
It was hard.
What was your inspiration for that one while we're on topic?
Yeah. So if you saw in the author's note on that one, I kind of like talked about this article that I'd read that was it was called like Meet the Men Who Spy on Women Through Their Webcams. And I had once again been on Reddit there. With that one, I had been in the legal advice subreddit. I'm trained as a lawyer and I practiced as a lawyer before I was writing full time. And so I sometimes like to go into the legal advice subreddit and just kind of like read about interesting things. And I had gone in there and I had read this post about some guy that was convinced that his boss was spying on everybody at home through like with cameras and stuff. And I was like, well, that can't possibly be true. Like who would even believe that? But then I was like reading the comments and everybody was like, oh yeah, well, you know, they might have like these remote administration tools like installed. And so I kind of went down this rabbit hole of researching and I just got more and more horrified as I was doing it. And so that was then where the inspiration from that book came from. And the fact that Audrey was an influencer was something that I just always been really interested in influencers and kind of what would motivate somebody to put so much of themselves out there on the internet to kind of like commodify their own lives. So like, Are You Sleeping is about people whose lives are being commodified by somebody else. And then Follow Me was kind of about people who do it to themselves.
So your title, Are You Sleeping? Was that just in reference to like the memories being locked deep? Like, are you just sleepwalking through your life and you don't know what happened, or?
That's good. No. The history of the title of this book is very fraught. When I pitched it and when it was picked up by my editor, I was calling it Reconsidered, which was the name of the podcast in the book. And she was like, well, obviously the title has to change. And I was like, oh yes, obviously. So everybody kind of thought that Reconsidered sounded like, excuse me, I'm speaking.
She's laughing.
She's laughing.
Oh.
And it kind of sounded like a nonfiction book. And so we spent a lot of time trying to come up with a title. My editor came up with What I Tell You in the Dark, which then necessitated me writing scenes in which people were told things in the dark, which are still in the book. But Are You Sleeping was being simultaneously published in the UK. And my UK editor was like, I hate that title. If you call it that, I'm just going to call it something else. And so we really didn't want the book coming out at the same time with two different titles. And so we all went back to the drawing board, and somebody at my agent's agency came up with Are You Sleeping? And it had to do more with the fact that like Josie wasn't sleeping. She was struggling with insomnia. Lainey always struggled with insomnia, and that was kind of where it came from. Again, I think Truth Be Told is a better title. Titles are hard. They're so hard.
Well, that's how it's
You
marketed
tied
now.
in the Brother John song too.
I
Was
did.
that before or after you had the
That
title?
was after. That came about afterwards.
I didn't even think about that. but it did throw it in my head for a few hours.
Yeah.
The French version though.
Yeah, there's a nice little nod. If you ever do watch the series, there's a nice little nod to it. They have Josie giving piano lessons in the show, and she's playing
Oh, okay.
on the piano.
Heather, you started the series, right? How far have you gotten?
I was only able to watch the first show so far. I haven't had a chance to sit down and watch any more of them.
I've got it on my list.
It's on Apple TV?
Yes.
Is it
Yeah,
a-
I need.
It's a series, but so how many have been done? Like,
There are 10 episodes.
there are 10? Is that the complete thing, 10 episodes, or is it going on?
There's 10 episodes in the first season, so that's the entirety of Josie's story. They're shooting the second season right now, but it won't be available for a while yet.
And that'll be a different podcast that Poppy's doing, different stories, different families.
It's definitely a different story. I actually don't know anything about it. I don't know if Poppy is still doing a podcast or if she's moved on to doing some other sort of thing. I was really excited because Nichelle Tramble-Spellman, who's the showrunner and the head writer for the television series, had invited me to come out and sit in the writers' room with them for part of the second season. And I was so excited. I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. But I was supposed to go in the beginning of April 2020, and I obviously did not go. So I didn't get to have that experience, which is kind of a bummer. But she said if there's a season 3, definitely.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed for season 3.
That would be fun for you.
Yeah. I don't really know much about writing for television. All I know is that it's extremely different than writing a book. Because when I'm writing a book, it's really just me, and my agent and editor come in later, but it's really just me. And when you're writing for a television show, it's an entire team of people, all with different ideas.
Yeah.
So I think it would be neat to experience.
If you could spend a day with any author that you admire, who would you pick and why?
Ooh. Is this a living or dead author thing, or?
Yes, it can be living or dead.
Okay. Ooh. I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna just choose 2. So my dead author would be Shirley Jackson, because I think her stuff is just like phenomenal. I read We Have Always Lived in the Castle when I was about 10 years old, and I think it's just been just burned into my brain ever since. I think that's like one of the things that really kind of like launched me on wanting to write stuff that was a little bit creepier. But for the living author, Curtis Sittenfeld is one of my favorite authors, and I think that she just seems like she would be just a very interesting person to hang out with. So I think those are probably be my tips.
So what was the name of the living one? I didn't hear what you said.
Curtis Sittenfeld.
Curtis Sittenfeld?
Curtis Sittenfeld. She wrote a book called Prep, which is one of my favorite books of all time. She also wrote one called American Wife, which is one of my other favorite books. It's kind of like a fictionalized story of like Laura Bush's life. It's very interesting. And she just recently came out with one called Rodham, which is a fictionalized version of Hillary Clinton's life. It's like, what if Hillary never married Bill?
So I just looked her up, and this one, I think I read it, The Eligible, a modern retelling Pride and Prejudice. My Goodreads said I read it, but I honestly don't. I read a lot. So.
Gretchen, can you send me the link? I can't find it.
To what? Curtis Sittenfeld?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And then Shirley Jackson, Natalie, wrote The Haunting of Hill House.
Ooh. Okay.
That's a lot.
I know you liked that TV show.
I will never be watching. I'm not going to be watching or reading that book, but I did watch the series. I had to finish it. Otherwise it would haunt me forever. It had to have closure.
I haven't watched the series, but I read the book one night at so my mom lives my mom's house is really old. It's like more than 100 years old, and so it creaks a lot. And I read it one night when I was at her house, and she wasn't there, and it was just creaking like in the basement and then in the hallway. I was like, it was the wrong time to read that book.
Right.
Very creepy.
Thanks,
But
Leah, just got
I'm
it.
lucky in that I know a lot of, I've gotten a chance to meet a lot of other authors. So I always feel kind of spoiled with that question because I know that there are a lot of other authors that I've met that I would like to hang out with still.
Who's your
Mhm.
favorite that you've met?
Angie Kim wrote a book called Miracle Creek, and it is extremely good. I recommend it to everybody. And Angie's a fabulous person in life and in stories. So I'd recommend that one. Angie lives in Virginia also. She lives up in Great Falls.
Okay.
Or over in Great Falls. I'm not very good with directions, but yeah.
Taking notes.
Miracle
Always
Cure.
looking for something to read.
What are you guys reading next?
What is next, guys?
Little Disasters.
Oh, Little Disasters by Sarah Vaughn, and she may end up joining us. I'm super excited. So she
Okay,
and I
cool.
have been emailing, and I think the date works for her. So we have 11 authors joining us in total this year,
That's awesome.
which I'm super excited about. So
Yeah,
it's
very
been
cool.
fun. It's neat to have these discussions.
Yeah. I mean, if anything good has come out of the pandemic, I think it's that I've gotten a lot more invitations to do things like this, to like join like book clubs like remotely. Because before I mostly had invitations to come join book clubs locally, which are nice also, but it's really neat to be able to talk to people that I wouldn't get a chance to see otherwise. And getting a chance to do like events also. So like I have some good writer friends that live out in California that had some books come out, and like, you know, I never would have been able to go to their like, you know, release events because on the other side of the country, but
Right.
because it was online, I was able to do it, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, I
And
think
as a participant, I've been, we're in the middle of the Virginia Festival of the Book right now. And I've been able to go to different sessions. Normally I would have, it's in Charlottesville, so it's an hour's drive for me. So normally I would have had to go pick a day, maybe two, and pick what sessions. This is, so I've also appreciated that. This way I can go here home, I don't have to travel, and I can see them. Now, I do really miss the in-person event, but it's a very nice alternative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's great because like our book club, we would not have these members. We were when we started out, we were really just Atlanta area and meeting in person and going to restaurants, which was fun. A few of them before the pandemic, but this is just great because we've got, you know, Michigan friends and Virginia book club members, and then we get the authors to come. So I feel like we'll just keep this form. Would want to keep this.
We will. This format will have to stay. Actually, one of my friends was asking me about that earlier because they know how passionate I am about like this book club and everything, you know, around it. And they were like, well, when the world goes back to normal, what will you do? And I'm like, we'll still keep this format. I'm like, some of my favorite people don't live here and couldn't join us. You know what I'm saying? Like we couldn't have Natalie and Gretchen, and Heather lives in Ohio and Becky lives in Virginia. I'm like, I want the ability. I have a friend that's in New Mexico that joined, and I have a friend that moved to Mexico and for like a month. And so she would join us from like a poolside in Mexico. And I was always so jealous, but it's fun.
Yeah, I'm in a book club with some of my friends from high school, and I have a friend that lives out in Los Angeles, and she's always like joining from like poolside with like a drink, and I'm always like, oh, so lovely.
Yes, that's exactly what I would think. She'll show us her view, you know, and I'm like, oh, I'm sitting in my living room. I would love to be there.
Yeah. I show you my view of 12 inches of snow on my deck.
Ooh, yes, you do. Your view I'm never jealous of. I hate to say. When I see all that snow, I'm like, no, thank you.
And we all miss Illinois when we see that, Gretchen. We're all like, it'd be great to be back in Illinois in the winter.
Yeah. Chicago gets some storms, I'll tell you. My daughter had a gymnastics meet there and we had to take the train down because the storm was so bad. And
Ugh.
when we got into the city, I couldn't believe it was insane how bad the snow was.
Yeah, I lived in Chicago. I went to law school in Chicago, so I lived there for 3 years at least. And my law school was like right on the lake. So I'd like get off the train and I'd like trudge towards school, and you just get this like blast of like cold, like lake wind with snow in your face. I mean, that the benefit was that I never wanted to leave the library once I was there. So that really helped me with my school, but no, it was so cold.
So why the shift from a lawyer to an author, to a writer? Or what was inspirational for that?
Yeah, so I had always wanted to write. Like I've been writing since I was just like a little kid. I used to like take my mom's typewriter and like write Babysitter's Club fan fiction. I've been always writing. And I had this idea that I would be a lawyer and that I could write in my spare time. And I did not fully appreciate that being a lawyer meant that you had no spare time. Mm-hmm. So my husband's a lawyer also, and we were in New York, and I mean I was eating all 3 of my meals at my desk every day. Like there were days that like my husband and I just like didn't see each other because we were always just like at the office. And so I knew something needed to change. And he and I actually both quit our legal jobs in 2014, and we spent 8 months traveling, which was really nice. And it was kind of like it was definitely like a hard reset in my brain. And when we came back, I was like, well, I was still kind of in the space where I was like, if I'm going to make something with the writing, this is the time that I'm going to do it. If I can't get anything done in the next couple of months, I'm going to have to start looking for another law job. And that was when I sat down and wrote Are You Sleeping? And I sold it pretty quickly. So, I mean, being a writer is not the same financially as being a lawyer, but I'm lucky in that my husband shoulders the financial burden. It was so I was a bankruptcy lawyer also. So it's, because lots of times when I say that I was a lawyer, people are like, oh, well, that must really help you with your crime fiction writing. And I was a bankruptcy lawyer, so I was like, writing about, or I was, helping people who were filing claims because they owned like $20 worth of stock or something. It was not really the same sort of dramatic things that you might otherwise think.
I think it's very few lawyers, very small percentage that do what we see on television.
Yeah.
Most of the lawyers I've known, that's not at all what they do. Not that it isn't important, but it's not that dramatic courtroom.
Yeah. Yeah. My husband is a litigator, and he also is not really ever in court. It's mostly they just settling things and having phone calls. So a lot of phone calls. But I always say that one of the things that I learned from being a lawyer was it really made my writing a lot better. Before I went to law school and before I worked in a large law firm, the things that I wrote I was very long-winded. My inclination still in my first drafts is to be extremely long-winded and to use, 30 words where like 7 would do. But after I went to law school and when I first started then working in a large law firm, and I had a partner always like revising what I did, I really learned how to be a lot more economical with my words. And I'm still awfully long-winded sometimes. Sometimes I was just like flipping through this and I was like, oh my, that was a lot of semicolons to use in one paragraph. But that's the danger in reading something that's already been published. You see all the places that you want to like change things. But it definitely helped. you saying? Yeah, look, it's a book club. It's a book club.
Hi. Hello.
So do you name any of your characters after like your children or family or anything?
No, I'm always actually really careful not to do so. But that's actually an interesting point. When I wrote most of Follow Me before my son was born. I wrote most of Follow Me before my son was born, and I sent it to my editor the month before he was born, and then he was born, and he didn't have a name at first when he was born, and then he was born, and we named him Theodore, and we were going to call him Teddy for short. And Nick in Follow Me was originally named Ted, and so I had to then I called my editor, and I was like, good news, I had a baby. Bad news, we have to change part of the book. And it wasn't a big deal at that point to change something like that, but I could not come up with another name, and I spent so long because I really wanted a name that felt kind of like frat boyish, but that also that Audrey could kind of make into an E name. So she calls him Nicky, but in the original draft, she was calling him Teddy. So I really struggled with it. But no, I definitely try and not to name my characters after people that I know in real life.
Well, a lot of authors do though, in the author's notes, they'll say oh, I named this for my cousin, and I told you I'd put you in a book, and I did.
Yeah. I think possibly because I write suspense stories, and most of the characters in them are not very nice, that I wouldn't want somebody to think that I was naming something after them. That's why it's really important that I changed Ted's name. I didn't want my son to ever grow up and be like, wait a second. He's not a very good guy.
Oh my gosh.
And so this is Penny, and I have a draft of another book that will probably never see the light of day, but that has a protagonist in it named Penny. And I actually spent a lot of time being like, well, if I name my daughter that, then I can't name the character that. And my daughter won. So.
Well, it's funny. I was telling Natalie, my daughter's name is Delaney, and my son's name is Brady. And we read a book or two books that had not nice, bad character named Brady. And then there's Laney, and I'm like, what the? And she's like, well, it was Laney, not Delaney. I'm like, I know, but that's a nickname for Delaney's.
Yeah. My brother was dating a girl named Laney at the time that this book got sold, and I was like,
oh no.
Yeah, I was like, well, it's not, I didn't name it after her. So.
That's so funny.
Do people ever think that they're in your book and they're not in your book? They think that you based a character on them, but you did not base the character on them.
Yeah, most of my girlfriends from home think that Ellen is them, and Ellen is none of them. So,
I loved Ellen. I thought she was great, and I liked her name. Her name was Ellen Kelly at one point, right? Was it? I don't remember if that was her. Yes, I like that name, but I liked Ellen. She was fun.
Thank you. I did too. So did my editor. My editor was always leaving me notes on the page that were like, can we get more Ellen, please?
Ellen, I guess Ellen's in the TV series.
No, there's no Ellen. Yeah, that was another one I was kind of bummed about. We didn't get to have any Ellen at all. I mean,
wow.
But she doesn't get killed in the series, so that's.
Yeah, I was gonna say killing Aunt A off feels like a big change.
Yeah, it was because I guess I can't say exactly what they were thinking, but because so much of the story now is Poppy's story and about the people in Poppy's life, that having too many extra ancillary characters in here's the other thing in the series that you'll quickly realize, so it's not really a spoiler, but their mom is alive. Aaron Berman is alive. So
Well, they had to switch it.
yeah.
Is she in a cult still?
Is she what?
Is she still in the cult and everything? So she's alive and in the cult and removed
No.
like she is
No, she's just
for the
different.
time that she was?
She's just different.
Oh.
They really kind of like streamlined a lot of the bits of Josie's life. Because then there's so much else going on with Poppy's life. And they kind of build out Warren Cave's character also.
So, but did Erin still kill her husband in the show?
Well, I'm not going to tell you because
Okay.
I did not get to know. So yeah. So I got to go to the premiere, which is very cool. And it sounds like such a brag, but I was actually talking to Octavia Spencer at the premiere.
Ooh.
And she was like, do you know how the show ends? And I was like, no. And she just went, all right. So I actually had to like wait and watch it with everybody else.
Fun.
And I can't remember why I didn't actually get to watch the last episode on the day that it came out. I can't remember if my husband had like some sort of like work thing, and so we both had to go to it, or if the baby was crying or something. I don't remember. I didn't watch it, and so then I was just like, oh, everyone else knows how my book ended on the television series, and I
That's
don't.
funny. They must really threaten those people because there's so many series that have real dramatic endings and it doesn't get out, which is kind of amazing when you consider how many people work on a show, and they must really clamp down on them because you don't find out the ending in advance, which is kind of remarkable, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. One of the things that I was really surprised about when I'd gone to the set was how many people there were just like associated with, and I mean, I only saw them shooting what ended up being about like 10 minutes worth of film, even though I was there for like 2 full days. And that's another reason I don't really want to work in television. There seems to be a lot of sitting around. But there were so many people involved, you know, all of the light people and the sound people, and it was really eye-opening.
I still just can't get over how good your Penny is. Like
Oh, thank you.
my kids were not, no, I wouldn't have been able to do that when they were
That's
that
because
age.
you named them after serial killers.
Yes, I did, apparently. Lainey didn't
At
kill
least
anybody.
according to our book club.
You're right.
Yeah, I think part of it is that she has a very enthusiastic older brother who just like wants to hold her all the time. So she's not being like grabbed at right now. So she's just like, this is nice. This is lovely. Just hanging out, having some Cheerios. Are any of you guys writers?
No,
Becky,
I wish.
you have a book, don't you, Becky?
Well, I had a manuscript. It was a middle grade manuscript. I really liked it. It was a lot of fun. But it hasn't gone anywhere. And I've got a couple other projects that I'm working on right now. So, yeah.
We'll see.
I write work memos.
Very cool.
But I do have to edit everyone's work. Like my boss is on vacation. He's like, everyone send their stuff to Gretchen to review it and review the minutes. I'm like, I don't have time for this. But I do like, I am the person, like your editor. I'm like, no, too many words, take this out. Like, what are you trying to say here? Like, this sounds better. And I feel bad sometimes like criticizing my coworkers' work, but I'm like, sorry, I was asked to edit it.
Actually, Kathleen, I do have a question. When you were starting out and trying to get feedback and trying to get readers just to read, what strategy worked best for you? I had people say, yeah, sure, I'll read it, and they never did, or they never gave me feedback, or they gave me their feedback wasn't meaningful. It was just, oh yeah, good, you know. How did you find readers for your work?
So well, I will say for this book, I actually did not have any, which is not the way to go. But going forward, I've found I've made a lot of really good connections through through Facebook groups devoted to kind of my genre. So again, like I thought I was writing a women's fiction book. So I joined the women's, my tongue always gets tripped over this, but the Women's Fictions Writers Association. And they have a really active Facebook group, and they do a lot of like matching up with critique partners and that kind of stuff online. And I'm also active in a couple other, like I just exchanged some pages with some other writers that I met through another one of the Binders Facebook groups. So I've actually had my best success finding people to kind of critique my work like that online, which I found surprising. You know, I used to live in New York, and I was like, oh, well, if I'm ever going to find like a good writers group, it's going to be when I'm here in New York. And I tried out a couple of writers groups, and I just couldn't find anybody that was interested in the kind of work that I was doing. Cause you know, you have to find somebody that's really kind of like their interests are aligned, that they're going to be like the kind of person that would be reading your book. But then, you know, they also have to be kind of serious. So it's difficult. I think I just read something somewhere that said like one woman went through like, I want to say like 20 different critique partners before she finally found one that worked for her. So it's a bit of a challenge.
And one stab I made at a writers group, and there's not a lot, well, there's some possibilities. One of the women was just so defensive and offensive that I thought, oh, no.
Yeah.
Gosh, can't make it.
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, because when you're submitting your work to somebody else, you know, you need to kind of let down your ego and be able to take the criticism. Now, I mean, like, having said that, I actually have a stack of short stories that I turned into a writing class in college that I still have not been able to read the comments on because I'm just a little too fragile about. But in general, I'm better with my work now.
I took a couple writing classes in college, fiction writing, and I'm still traumatized by one, not from my story, but the teacher, the professor was actually a writer himself, Spear Morgan. And this young man finished, we had to read from our work in class. And after he read, Spear Morgan took the guy's manuscript and threw it in the trash. And I was just like, I mean, I think some of us just were like gasp.
Yeah.
And we never saw that guy again. He never came, you know, halfway through the semester. He never showed up again. And I just thought, oh my
terrible.
gosh, that was harsh. And the thing was, it was not awful, horrible. I mean, I didn't really get it. And we weren't even going to discuss it. He just took it, threw it in the trash, and was like, next.
Oh my God. Yeah, I was in a writers group earlier or I guess last week. And one of the women that was leading it was telling me about how she was in a writing workshop one time with an instructor that people would read their work aloud, and he would interrupt them and be like, stop, I'm bored. And then we'd just like move on to the next one. And I was like, but throwing in the trash, I think, is actually even worse.
That was, and he was devastated. It was awful. It was awful to be in that room.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I'm not a writing teacher myself, but I don't think that's terribly productive.
That's terrible. Like, the person should have been fired. You know, that's just not acceptable.
Yeah, it was harsh.
Yeah.
But Phyllis, was it actually bad? Like, was it something that could have been sold? Was the professor doing him a favor? I don't know.
You know, I can't tell from his perspective, because I mean, it was so long ago too, but I don't remember thinking that it was the worst that we'd heard by any means. You know, there were a couple other people that I would have been more inclined to dismiss than him. So from my perspective, it wasn't really awful. It certainly didn't warrant that reaction, I didn't think.
Okay. I went to art school, so that is even more subjective, I guess. And I remember professors throwing things out windows, tearing the corners of things.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh my
I-
God.
yeah, but it's
I had the
cutthroat,
same
right?
experience.
Well, I
Yeah,
was
it was
a
the same
dance
way.
major, and then we had like visiting dance instructors from companies like American Ballet Theater or whatever, and they would walk up to students and like grab their women dancers and mostly and grab like your behind and say, lose this. This is a long, this is a long time ago. I don't think that would be happening today, but I don't think, but because it was a university, we were university dance majors, we were clearly not 8-year-olds that were going to be in professional companies, because everybody
Right.
was dancing later in their, later in their lives.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it was crazy. I mean, they were good, and there were other things they did that were great for us, but that was typical, that kind of critique of your body, which is about as personal as you can get.
Yeah.
You guys are creative. I went to school for accounting. It was right or it was wrong.
Yeah. Nobody was
Yeah.
grabbing your behind.
or criticizing
Oh,
the way I solved that formula. I had the right answer. They don't care how I got there, right? Oh my gosh.
So Kathleen, you finished and you turned in your next manuscript. Are you working on something else now?
No, not yet, because I am I'm definitely, there's definitely a lot of work that's going to need to happen on the book that I'm still working on. Like I said, I haven't sold it yet. My editor is no longer, the woman that edited Are You Sleeping and Follow Me is no longer at the same publisher. So query where I take the book. So I still have a lot of work to do on that, but I'm always kind of like thinking about new ideas. I had like one pop into my head last night and I was like, oh no, I can't work on anything. I just have to like write that note down and then get to it later. But I have written a lot of books to like 75% completion recently. So the fact that like this one got all the way done feels really good, and I feel very positive about it. So
Good.
It seems like we had another author whose editor left halfway in the middle, and left. So that was kind of a delay and upheaval. I wonder if there's a lot of mobility with these editors.
Yeah, I'm certainly not the only person that I know that's lost their editor partway during the process. I was lucky, I guess, in that Lauren stuck around through the actual editing of my book. She left before the book was published, so there was still like some stuff to do to carry it across the goal line. But all of the kind of like creative editing was done. It was just like copy editing that was left. But yeah, I do think people move around quite a bit. But I don't really know why. I don't know too much about the actual like publishing industry, like how that works.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to leave. I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed the book. It was fun for me. Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you, Brittany, for setting it up. And I will see you guys later.
Okay, Becky.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Becky.
Bye, Becky. Thanks.
Becky.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna run too. I have to go to the grocery store, but it was so nice chatting with you and just getting some of the insights from the author's perspective is very nice. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. It was wonderful.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for inviting me. I had a really good time, and thank you guys for not bothering. I've got a baby on my lap. It's kind of
No, she's adorable. She was a
Yeah.
welcome addition.
Very
Yeah.
So
charming.
well behaved.
Both of you are charming.
oh, well,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You are.
Thank you for having me. If you guys have any like questions afterwards, or anything, you can Brittany has my email address, so it's okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Yeah, y'all shoot
So-
me any remaining questions and I'll compile an email if we have anything extra.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And we'll be
Thank you.
reading whatever you write next. I was going to say, we'll follow
Thank
you.
you.
I personally love you and I arranged the book list. So whatever comes out in 2022, we'll be reading. I can tell you that.
Thank
So
you
you
so
have our
much.
support ongoing. So,
Thank you.
Thank
all right.
you.
You
Have a
guys
nice weekend.
have a good
Bye.
Sunday.
Bye.
Bye.
Go up to